This video is going to explain how to set up a BJE tank sensor to have the float switch sit at any tank depth you want, high or low. There's a variety of BJE products that help monitor above ground storage tank levels. The Sentry in both tank mounted and wall mounted configurations, the 007 Tank Alarm, and MK6 all have tank sensors with a float switch. From the factory, we ship float switches configured for high-level monitoring where the switch will be about 6 inches deep into the tank. The tank probes can be configured differently for different applications without too much trouble though. This video will explain how to set up a tank sensor for any size tank and any float switch depth. To explain how this works, we'll be going through an example where we set the sensor up for monitoring a low fluid level in a 44-inch deep tank. This is similar to what you'd have in a standard 275-gallon oblong tank. The tube we send from the factory is a 6-inch long, 1/2-inch diameter PVC pipe nipple. In other applications, you could just change out that 6-inch long pipe for a different standard length. But for this example, we're going to be using these 1/2-inch PVC couplings and some 1/2-inch PVC pipe. The two components that we have to connect together have female 1/2-inch NPT threads. One is the tank adapter that screws into the 2-inch tank opening, and the other is a hexagonal piece that holds the float switch. First, I'm going to dry fit the couplings and assemble the float switch. To figure out how long my PVC pipe needs to be, I'll lay things out on a workbench where it'll be easier to measure things. In this example, I've chosen to have my float switch about 6 inches off the bottom of the tank, so I'll subtract 6 inches from my total tank depth and use a tape measure to find where I need to cut the 1/2-inch PVC pipe. From the bottom of the 2-inch adapter threads to the bottom of the float switch stem is going to be about 38 inches. Cut and deburr the pipe. I did a dry fit to make sure that everything looked right and then disassembled the couplings for the next step. I used some PVC cement to permanently connect the couplings to the end of the pipe. You can also use a little PVC cement on the threads to make sure that things don't come apart in the tank over time. Thread your float switch wires through the sensor assembly and tighten down the float switch stem. At this point, you can trim the lead wires and make a good wiring connection to the wires going back to the circuit board inside of the alarm box of a 007, MK6, or Sentry. When you get everything put back together and the wiring connections are made, it's time to test the tank probe to make sure that it's working the way that it should. In my example, I want to know when the tank is running empty, so the alarm should go off when the float switch drops. You can see that the alarm is going off when the float switch is up, so that's the opposite of what I want. The solution to that problem is to flip the float. We'll remove the C-clip on the bottom of the float switch stem and remove the float, turn it around, and put the C-clip back on. Now you can see that the alarm is going off when the float switch drops. The sensor is now ready to install into my tank. This way of customizing your BJE tank sensor can work for any length of tank sensor you might need just by cutting your PVC pipe to a different length. There are a few common reasons why you might want a low-level alarm in your tank. A tank sensor can be set up to monitor the interstitial space on a double-wall tank. If the product starts leaking into the secondary containment, the float switch will set the alarm off. If you have a tank of new product, the float switch can be set up to give an alarm when you're running too low and need to reorder, or when you're running too low and you're in danger of having to reprime your pump and purge air from the lines. The tank sensor I've talked about is part of a BJE 007, MK6, or Sentry. If you have an existing tank alarm and would like to add another sensor to it, our 7660 and 7661 sensors can be added and customized to your application. Whatever your application is, you can set up a BJE tank alarm system to alert you when the tank needs attention. With a few low-cost parts and some time, you'll have the right tank sensor for your waste oil, new product, secondary containment, or dozens of other applications.